Every lady in this room that has on a diamond ring, would you just hold it up in the air, please? Or hold your finger up if you don't want to take it off. Every single woman in here. Let me ask you something. Does that ring have value to you? Does it have extraordinary value to you? And let me ask you one other thing. If you've got a daughter or a son, is that a ring that you're going to pass down to your children because it has value in your family? And will your child want that ring because they understand the value of this ring, not only because of what you might have spent on it in physical dollars, but it's because it's your legacy, right? It has something to do with your legacy, right? And so then your children, they will take this same ring and they will pass it down to their children because they've been taught what the value of it is. They get the value. And yet here we are in a nation full of people who have been given the greatest gift mankind has ever been given. And yet few of us understand the extraordinary measure of the value of this gift. Freedom. Freedom. It had a great price. It continues to have a great price. As a matter of fact, all the way back to our founders, the sons and daughters of this nation have understood that freedom was never, is never, and will never be free. It's always had a cost. And it is up to us to teach our generations that follow us what the cost of freedom was so that they will have enough respect for it to honor it and share that with the next generation. It's our job. On August 26th, I stood in Arlington National Cemetery. It wasn't the first time I'd been there. I was there with hundreds of people, and 17 caskets were laid out in front of me with flag-draped coffins laid out in front of me on fake green AstroTurf with mud underneath. Tents set up for hundreds of us. And I remember standing there that day I was on grass and standing there on that beautiful grass and just taking in the scope of what I was looking at. Row after row, mile after mile, acre after acre of sacrifice for my freedom. And as I stood there, I could not help but just be swept back to 9 years previous when I visited that sacred ground for the very first time with my firstborn child and only son, Aaron Vaughn. He had just gone to boot camp. He was in Virginia Beach, and his father and I went up to see him because he had a little time where we could be with him. And he said, "Mom and Dad, let's drive up to Arlington. I've never been there." We'd never been there either. And we were like, "Yeah." He said, "There's nobody I'd rather go with than you." So we went. And I remember as soon as we walked in, there's a sign there that says something about, I can't quote the words of it, but there's a sign when you walk into Arlington, and it says something about, understand you are on sacred ground, behave accordingly. And we just stood there at that sign, and from that moment on, the rest of the day that we spent walking the streets of Arlington National Cemetery, we literally almost couldn't breathe, experiencing those moments together. And I remember latching my arm through Aaron's, knowing that we were at war when he joined the military, that he was going to war very soon. And I remember just latching my arm through his and us walking and weeping. And we couldn't even talk. And when we got in the car that day when it was all over, no one said a word in our car. No one said a word. We were just overwhelmed with the level of what had been given for us to be free. So here I am on August 26, 2011, and I look around those fields, and I realize that my son and I had walked every single street that created the frame around the ground where he was about to be buried. That now the cost of freedom was personal. It wasn't someone else's kid. It was the love of my life. And I've made it my job to make sure that every single person that I encounter throughout the rest of my life understands how precious The gift is that we've been given to be free. And I want to say this. If you think our worst days are ahead of us and our best are behind us, you are wrong. America is the greatest nation ever devised by man. We have gone through bumps and bruises. We have seen things go awry. We have done things horrible, but we have always corrected our course. We have always fought and died and bled to make it right. And I'm absolutely certain it's because we were divinely created by our Creator, this nation was. A representative republic. A representative republic is the noblest form of government ever devised by man, and it demands protection. Aaron, I'm not going to take much time. I just want to tell you just a little bit about him. He was a boy who grew up loving nothing more than sitting at his father's feet, listening to stories about our history. He was a kid who could name all the heads of state by the time he was 14 years old. I tell people this, and it's really hilarious. We were on a mission trip one time when he was 16, and one of the old gentlemen with us was kind of cranky, and he fell asleep in a chair. He'd been giving the teenagers kind of a hard time. He fell asleep in the chair, and he was balding, and my son went over and drew Gorbachev's birthmark on his forehead. And I just thought to myself, how many kids even know who Gorbachev is, much less can recreate his birthmark on somebody's forehead? That's who he was. He loved this country. He understood what had been given for him, and he spent his whole life praying to God that he would get the chance to take his place in history and defend it. And he overcame unbelievable odds to do it. He became a member of the United States military as a U.S. Navy SEAL and made it all the way to the famed, lauded SEAL Team 6, the peak of the peak. And you would have never met a more humble human being in your entire life. And every single time, Aaron was a believer. And because of that, I know where he went the day that helicopter went down, and I know that I'll be with him again. Even though he died 7,000 miles away from all of us who loved him, he drew his last breath in the arms of the one who loved him more than any of us have ever loved him. All his life, he knew what he was created to do, and nothing thwarted that vision. We often said that Aaron did not become a warrior after he became a Navy SEAL. He became a Navy SEAL because he was a warrior. And he was a kid willing to follow the course that God had planned for him. And speaking of planned, he was unplanned. And he became a world changer. He shifted the course of history. His story has been told in magazines, documentaries. His name's been on the hood of NASCARs. He's been honored at NFL games, at Major League Baseball games. He's had article after article. If you Google his name, at times you'll come up with 17, 18 million hits when you Google his name. And almost every single one of those searches will tell you about his faith in God. Still to this day, I get routine messages of people telling me that their life is better, that their life is different because Aaron Vaughn lived. They never met him, but because he lived, he impacted them. And again, unplanned. I just want to finish by saying this. Again, if you think, I want to encourage you something actually, and just follow me here for a second. If you really do feel like our best days are behind us, I encourage you to do something. Turn off your television. Get off social media. Because that's not who we are. Next time you feel like America is over, we're no good anymore, I want you to pick up a ticket to a Friday night high school football game, and you will remember who we are as people. I want you to drive by a church parking lot on a Sunday afternoon, any church across your city, and realize that people are free to worship any God they choose because we're free, because we're Americans. Next time you're having a backyard barbecue, I want you to step back away from it all for just a minute and look around at what you have been given because you were fortunate enough, blessed enough to have been born in the United States of America where men are free, or to come here and be part of this dream. Don't ever let people tell you we're not who we are. Just yesterday morning, my days are just fuzzy. I was in Wisconsin this week. I live in Florida. I was in Wisconsin and they had a blizzard. And I'm thinking, I came out the morning and I had ice like 1.5 inches thick all over my car windows. And I'm like, what do I do? I'm a Floridian. I don't know what to do with this. I go in and ask the lady at the front desk and she hands me a card, a key card. I'm like, what? It's ice. That's not moving anything. But I forgot where I was going with that. Do you guys ever do that? Like you start trailing off on something, you're like, what was I about to say? Oh, I know what it was. So anyway, I go to board a plane and we're on this little puddle jumper to our first stop, right? And so it's one of those where you have to walk out on the tarmac and then it's got that steep staircase going up into the plane, and I want you to listen to this. I'm standing there in line behind, 30, 40, 50 people trying to board that plane. And up front, I can see, and it's 33 degrees, and the wind is gusting, and I'm thinking, why does anyone live here? That's what I was really thinking. But I'm glad they don't all want to be in Florida because it's crowded enough. But anyway, I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, I see this woman roll up in a wheelchair, and I'm thinking, there's no way she's getting in that plane, right? It's just a steep staircase straight up. She's an older white woman. And this great big black man comes right up behind her and nearly lifts her body off the ground and carries her up those steps. And I thought to myself, how dare you in the media constantly tell us we hate each other? We don't. God bless this nation and thank you for being here.